Okay, so good day. My name is Richard Richter, and today I will tell you something about what's new in MidPoint 4.6, codenamed Baumgarten. Before we get to the core of the presentation, which is 4.6 of course, because we had no what's new for the previous version, we will shortly get back to version 4.5 as well. And after 4.6, we also shortly talk about the supported platforms. So let's get back to version 4.5 for a while. It was released April of this year, and it's a feature release, 1-year support, and it has main features like identity matching, where the support for in-common ID match integration was added. There are some notification improvements and localizable message templates. Then flexible authentication was, there was added module for OpenID Connect, and many more GUI improvements. System configuration pages were reworked. There's also added expression support for Axiom query language and native failover support for LDAP and more. But from this we will focus only on two features, because many of the other features like GUI improvements and user experience was massively improved also in 4.6, so we'll focus on those in the core of the presentation. So let's talk about message templates first. This is part of the notification improvements, and it allows us to define content of the message, for instance notification, in a much more user-friendly way. How does it work? There's a GUI for it as well. So there's a list of these message templates, and the message template actually contains like default content, which is everything you have to care about if you're not interested in localization. But in case of a multi-language environment, you can also add localized content, which means that you can localize many of these types extended by the language. And how does it look? In the detail, the content is still an expression, which is typical in MidPoint. Eventually this may be enhanced, so it's as easy as just copy paste in HTML, but at this moment you still have to add that whole content of the expression, which in this case is mostly a script and the code. There's also another screen like this, which allows you to define these localized contents. And what is very handy for this kind of content, like message templates, because it's a string-based content, which means the expression returns string, we recommend using velocity templates for that. If you don't know, besides other scripting language like Groovy is typical, we recommend using Groovy for all kinds of expressions, but in this case there is also option to use velocity, which is a natural fit. It's also a built-in expression language, and it's actually supported in MidPoint for many years already, so it's a very good way how to just copy-paste some, I don't know, plain text, and then add these placeholders, which will be replaced by actual content, for instance, name of the recipient, and so on and so on. Now, how we can use these message templates. And the new way how to notify, how to configure notifications, we have separated the message transport configuration out of the notification configuration. That's rather minor change, but a couple of minor changes actually add up. Another important change is that the recipient expression is not returning only, it cannot return on, I mean, it can always return string, which is a recipient address, but now it can also return a focus object. And if it's a focus object, it's much more flexible. For instance, instead of defining all these subject, body, content type, and attachment expressions directly in the notifier, you can just reference the message template, which is prepared in the GUI. And then, based on the actor's preferred language, or the recipient's preferred language, so to say, we can choose the proper message template localized version. And with that, we go to the transport. And here again, because we have the recipient as a focus, we can actually choose email address for mail and, for instance, telephone number for SMS. So it's much more flexible. You can simply specify transports that have completely different kinds of recipient addresses in a single notifier. Previously, you had to do it in separate notifiers. Another important addition in 4.5 was Axiom. Axiom was added in 4.3, and in 4.4 it was partially supported, but the way the option to also evaluate expressions inside Axiom query language was one of the last pieces missing to make it fully supported. So in 4.5 Axiom is considered fully supported, and just to demonstrate how much shorter and clearer it is to use Axiom expression, we have two examples here, both with, of course, expressions, and one where we equal name with some right-hand path. There is virtually no noise in this Axiom version. And then we have another where we want to create a query where we compare create timestamp with the result of some Groovy script. And here we can do the same, either with this shorter version where triple backtick is it's a shortcut for Groovy script code expression, or if you want to use any expression, you can use this kind of syntax. I know YAML is another syntax. It is quite popular language, but it's another syntax that is kind of added to the MidPoint, but it's a nice fit because it's also low noise syntax that goes well together with the Axiom. And in this case, you can actually define any kind of expression. It can be script, it can be value, constant, and anything that is appropriate at this place. So these were two big things that came with 4.5 and were not significantly improved in 4.6. So let's talk about this 4.6 version. It's our latest version that came out on October 21st. It's another feature release, 1-year support, and the main features are major user experience improvements, where we will talk about resource wizard and self-service mostly. Then the smart correlation was correlation was overhauled, and we now call it smart correlation, which is another improvement on the 4.5 work and also on the whole history of correlation and MidPoint. Resource templates were added. We will talk about it in the context of resource wizard, resource discovery as well, and many more user experience improvements, like assignment panel can now use a repository. This is not only user experience, it's also potentially critical thing for some deployments. GUI configuration changes are applied without logout now. That's a very handy thing. And there are also saved searches. So let's talk about these things. And let's start with Resource Wizard. Because Resource Wizard, like from the user experience or user perspective, it can be called like a flagship of this release. There are three things how we approach this wizard. Resource templates were added, and resource templates are kind of like abstract resources which can be later extended or built upon. Then there is a discovery added, which is a way how we can ask the resource for more information, which allows to provide some information in the wizard. And finally, of course, massive user experience and UI improvements. The resource wizard has the first step is the basic configuration, where you create a new resource. You can do it either from scratch when you select the connector, or as I mentioned, those resource templates, you can choose the resource template. It's important to know that the resource template is kind of a super resource, and even if you change it afterwards, the changes will trickle down to the resources. So it's not like it's copied once and then it's disconnected from the resource template. The resource is always connected to the resource template. And then when we have the basic configuration done, there is object type configuration, and we will go through it on the screens on the next slide. So let's just dive into it. So resource wizard. Let's say we want to create a new resource, so we will choose a connector, and afterwards there's a multi-step, like four-step basic configuration wizard. First we have to name it, then we add some connection data, and after that the resource can be discovered, and on the next steps many options can be offered based on how the resource actually looks, and it can also offer some meaningful values, either as a default or to some suggestion lists. And after that you can choose what kind of schema objects you want, like object classes there, which this is CSV, so it's just one, but from LDAP you can actually filter from many. After that, there are three ways where you can go. You can either preview the data on the resource, or you can go on with the wizard and, for instance, add a new object type, or you can simply go back to the edit screen. In any case, the resource has been created, as written here, and is saved at this moment. To show what you can do next, on the edit screen, you can, if we get back here, on the edit screen, you can go to schema handler and choose another object type, and with that another wizard is open, which allows you to, again in relatively simple steps, define a new object type. So in this case we are creating a default account. It will be account object class, which is the object class selected before, and it will be mapped to MidPoint user. And with that, there are many more little like wizards for various aspects of this object type. We will not go through all of them, but we will just very quickly look at mappings, for instance, because that's a thing you have to do virtually always. And here we have an example of inbound mapping. You can notice that the inbound and outbound mappings are split into different tables. So while in XML, they are always under one reference of the attribute, here they are split, so you can simply focus on inbound mapping, which is all you need for source, a resource, or just on the outbound mapping. So it's a different view kind of. And then for the mapping, you can click on the edit and change more things, which, especially if you need to change some details, you click on the show empty fields and you have all the available options there. But as you can notice, by default, the wizard doesn't overwhelm you at first, and that's the point. With some object type defined, we have now object type specified with some intent. We can get to this to these mini wizards from the screens like account, entitlements, and generic objects, but you have to always choose the intent first. If you don't choose the intent, these tiles will not appear here. Or you can go there from schema handling as well. Another addition is capabilities editor. Previously these tiles were there on the resource details, but they were actually not clickable. Now you can click on them and change the capabilities from the user interface. And finally, as a segue to another topic, which will be a topic of correlation, one of those mini wizards allows you to configure correlation. And it can be as simple as defining a so-called correlation rule. In this case, we will say we will correlate based on the username. And then again, add it to the detail. And here you can add multiple correlation items. In this case, we just want to use name. And we say that when the name matches exactly then it's a match. And here, people who are familiar with previous correlation can be a little suspicious. How does it work? So let's get back to that. Let's move on to the correlation. In 4.6, the correlation mechanism is based on so-called correlation rules. And we have 4 types of these correlation rules. And the one you probably know from before is called filter. Here, you specify the filter, how the object is found based on the shadow attributes and resource object attributes, sorry. We have 2 more rule types like expression ID match. We will not talk about them here. They are available from versions 4.5 because the most important new way how to specify a correlation is so-called item correlation rules, which is also a suggested option for now. How does it work? I'm sorry, before that, there is also a way how to compose these rules. We'll talk about that. And also fuzzy searching. It doesn't have to be exact match. You can also match on, for instance, lunchtime distance. We'll talk about that as well. What we will not talk about is our experimental features like custom indexing and multiple identity sources, but these are all documented on the page, which is also listed here, and it will be also at the final slide. So item-based correlation, how does it work? Previously, the correlation filter searched for the focus by some resource object attributes, as I said already. Now, the item-based correlation compares focus-like object after the mapping. So the reason why, previously it worked based on the resource attribute, because the mapping was not executed before the correlation. Now, if you use this item correlator, the mapping is executed, and you can compare. Let's see this example, for instance. You say that the correlation is based on the employee number, for instance. If nothing else is specified here, it's based on an exact match, which is a default. And in this case, you compare employee number from a focal object with employee number from the resource object, but mapped already to the focus object, kind of. Like, you can imagine it's a temporary object after mapping. Item-based correlation can be specified in a couple ways, in a template, in a resource mapping, of course, but you can also put it directly into the attribute here, which is probably the shortest way, but least flexible. Always depends whether you need some fuzzy matching or something else. But if you need just a pure match, then you can simply say that the attribute like name, which is a resource attribute, it is correlated, and it will automatically take this name focus property and correlate it with the actual focus property from the object in the midpoint. I mentioned that there is a way how to compose these rules together. So it can be quite complicated, but this is rather a simple example. You can write multiple rules and group them to tiers. And the way how it works is that we go tier by tier. The tier is optional if it's not specified. It's the last tier. If you have no tiers at all, it's just a single tier, of course. And when the match is found, when the highest tier is, or the first tier is consulted, so to say, all the rules are executed, then we don't go to another tier. If not, then of course we go to another tier. But also inside the tier, you can create dependencies on of these rules. When you, for instance, say that name similarity rule should be ignored if the match was reached by this employee number match rule. So in that case, of course, this will be executed first, and then only if the match is not found here, then this will be consulted as well. And then inside, as I showed on the previous screen, you can add many items and many conditions. So here is a very simple rule with just a single condition, but in this case, it shows so-called fuzzy searching, which is a new thing also in 4.6. There are two available functions currently. These are limited also by what the repository can do. So we can't use functions that are not available, for instance, in Postgres. And we offer a Levenstein distance, which is quite a popular way how to find words that are similar, and also trigram similarity function. They are supported both in memory and in the native repository. In memory for business logic, and in the repository for queries. And this fuzzy search is used in correlation rules, so you can specify them there. But it's not exclusive to the correlation. So fuzzy search is actually, you can write it in any filter. So we can, for instance, ask for all objects where family name is similar enough to a word gran, whatever that is. So, and of course you can specify the threshold and whether it's included or not, the threshold. And with that, we covered everything related to correlation, and we'll move to other user experience improvements in a self-service department. So let's start with the home page. On the home page now, all the widgets shown there are configurable. So there's a new element homepage that can be added to admin GUI configuration, and all the configuration is done there. You can configure number of widgets, the visibility, and so on. And both standard, which means implemented in MidPoint, and also custom panels can be configured to be visible on that home dashboard page. In the previous way, how to configure it is deprecated, of course. This is how it can look. And going on with the self-service, there were also changes in the profile page. So the major thing is that the configuration for the self-service profile was separated from the configuration for the object details. So now you can have different configurations for each. Again, a specific element for this self-profile page was added to the GUI configuration customization element. And as an example, default MidPoint end user was updated that it hides the history of the user. So when some common end user logs in and looks at his profile, he doesn't see the history of the changes. It's considered rather an administrative information now, while the administrator always sees the same thing on the profile page. Of course, profile page is his profile page, but he would also see it on the detail of this Jack Sparrow guy. First, because it's a different configuration, as I said, so the profile page has a different configuration than the user detail. And second, because he has the right. Now, of course, be careful with configuring these things, because if you add end user role to the administrators, which doesn't make sense, but in this case, administrator would not see the history on his profile, but he would still see it in the detail, of course. Further changes on the self-service credentials page. Here the functionality is the same, but the page, of course, conforms to our new user experience look and feel. And finally, the last part of the request access is of the self-service pages is the request access. And here we have another wizard. It was completely rewritten, and there are 4 steps, but the first 2 steps are optional, which depends on the configuration or authorization of the user who asks for the access. How does it look? You can either ask for yourself or for some user from some list. And let's say that the user clicked on the users with name containing B. In that case, he can write the names there or select from a list. When he has the users selected, he has to choose the relation for the role that will be asked for. And with that, the role catalog will open. Here, it can be organized on three categories, so to say. It's organization structure, or collections, or role of teammates. The view can be shown as tiles, as you can see, or it can be switched also to the list. And when you chose the roles you want, in this case for some other user, what can happen is that the conflict appears. For instance, this separation of duty rules will say that the user can't have these two rules and these two roles, sorry. And it's a conflict. You can't submit the request now here, but you have to fix the conflict. So we have a conflict solver for that. You choose what to do, whether to keep the old one or choose the new one. When it's solved, everything is green. You get to the back. You get back to the shopping cart, and then you can click on that green button and send the request for access. So that was request access, and still going on with the user interface improvements. Assignment search panel is normally using the list of assignments from memory for showing the assignments and sorting them and so on. But sometimes it's not flexible enough. There are a couple of reasons. Either you can't formulate query you want, or for instance, you have many assignments for an object, and it's not performing well. Now, of course, we don't encourage people to have like too many assignments, but some deployments are just that way. Sometimes it happens, and this is the answer for that. You can switch the assignment panel to search from the database. This is only available for native repository, so it's a little warning, but it's our only recommended repository now, so it's not a big deal. You can, when you have this, you can search, for instance, by assignments target reference and various conditions on the reference, on the target of the reference. For instance, by the name of the role that is assigned. You can also search on the full text index of the target's reference. Be careful, because you may be confused, especially on the screen, that it's a full text for the assignment. That's not true. It's not assignment's full text. There is no full text for the assignment. It's a full text for the target object. You can also search by combination of target reference criteria and target object itself, and also by assignment extensions. Because this assignment panel is on the detail page, if you add some assignments and then you search them with the repository search, some of these are not yet saved. So to get better results, to get best results, you should always consider saving the object first. Then the search is most consistent. So let's go to some. If you want to enable it, it's a simple admin GUI configuration change. Let's go to see some examples. In this case, for instance, we have assignments where we search by the assignment extension called reason, and that's the result. But we can also search by full text in this case, and it's a full text, as I said, applied to the target of this assignment. In this case, these are roles. So it's a role that has somewhere in indexed attributes, items, word decisions. And finally, a little complicated example, which goes deeper than just to the target of the assignment. It's an Axiom filter that goes to the target of the assignment, and then through the role membership of those roles, it goes to the name of the role, so to say. So these are all roles that belong to that are assigned another role, which has a name system role. So quite complicated queries can be now executed in this panel if it's switched to the repository search. And also here this extension reason is sortable, so now you can sort by this. This is all based on a few new filters, because without them it wouldn't be possible. First one is the good old ref filter, but now extended, that you can combine the criteria on the filter, on the reference itself, like what's the target type and what's the, for instance, what's the relation of the reference. But also you can construct criteria on the target of that reference. So in this case, in this example, this is just a demonstration, because role membership, actually, yeah, there can be various role types. So yeah, this only goes for the actual roles, not other abstract role types, and also matches only the roles that have name super or start with the name super, with ignoring cases. So this is very interesting for multi-value references, because in single value references you could use ref and the dereference syntax, something like this with this @ sign. But when you have a multi-value reference, you want to apply both conditions, both parts of that and to a single value of, to each value of those references, because otherwise you're not interested in a match when one reference is a role type and another reference, perhaps not even role type, matches this condition. That's not what you want. You want to keep this query consistent. So that's why it's very important addition to the ref filter. And then there are brand new filters. First one is called referenced by, and it's actually the ref filter going the other way around. Normally we start from an object having the reference and we are searching by the target of the reference. But now imagine that you want to search for this side based on some conditions from an object that points to this object. A reference by allows exactly that. For instance, here we want to search for organizations that are assigned to a particular user, whatever the relation. So we say that we're searching for organizations. The search type is implied in the query. It's not in the filter. So organization has to be referenced by a user type using its parent or graph, and the user, this applies to this user now, has to have this OID. So it's quite handy filter, and of course this is used on the assignment panels, search using repository. Another filter that does something very similar, like referenced by, but for containers. Now we can more flexibly select containers that are owned by another object, or either another container when the structure is nested, or by another object. How does it look? For instance, let's filter assignments for a user with specified name. So we're asking for assignments that are owned by user via this path. This is important because there are actually two paths that lead to so-called assignment type. One is assignment and the other one is inducement. And here we are specifying that we are only interested in assignments, not inducements. And the name of the user is user3. So that's it. By mistake I said that the previous filter was used on the assignment panel. Sorry, this filter is used on the assignment panel. Yes. A little bit more complicated example for more nested structures is we want to search for access certification work item type, which is owned by any access certification case type, which is still a container, is owned by access certification campaign type with this OID. This query actually was possible also in previous midpoints because there is a way how to filter by parent OID. But if we wanted to find this campaign type by name, for instance, that wouldn't be possible previously. So in this filter, we can write any condition. It's not only based on OID or container IDs. So that's what owned by brings as additional flexibility in the query department. And finally, saved searches. It's a very nice addition to the user interface where the user can now create search, and it can be any kind of search. It can be Axiom search, basic or advanced search, and he can then say, or they can then save it by under some name. Now these are personal filters. At this moment, there's no way how to share my filters with someone else. But these filters can also be configured, but not with this way, not with this save-in. They can also be pre-configured in the admin configuration via XML, of course. But the user can now use the filters, and it's very easy to use them and delete them. What is important, of course, the filter is specific for the panel where it's defined. So of course you want different filters on a user page, for instance, than on the, I don't know, roles page. And one more, actually not so little change, is that when you are playing with GUI configuration, you probably know that you had to log out and log in again to apply the configuration. And similarly, if you change someone's assignments, like roles, what were assigned to the user, or if you disabled the user, the change was not applied immediately. Now, most of these changes are applied immediately. So if you just change some GUI configuration, you don't have to log in, log out. The GUI profile will be recompiled immediately, and you can see the changes. Also, if you deactivate the user actually, if it's logged in already, it will not be able to click on anything else. So depending on the change, he will be logged out, or if he lost access, he will be shown forbidden page. And that applies the moment administrator makes the change. The minor exception from this is valid from valid to, which is applied via validity scanner every 15 minutes by default. There are some other minor limitations that are described in the docs, but most of the changes are applied immediately. And with that, I believe we covered most of the new additions to the midpoint that were made in MidPoint 4.6, which is new resource wizard. All the self-service pages were reworked completely, including request access. Then there is a smart correlation, especially item-based correlation, which allows either exact match or fuzzy match on the focal-like items. Saved searches on the GUI. Assignment panel can use repository search and quite complex filters, which is of course supported by these new filters. And finally, GUI and assignment changes are applied without logout. So that's for MidPoint 4.6. And shortly about those platforms, here the changes are mostly to the way how it's deployed, because we support Linux, of course, we support Java 11, but recommend Java 17, both Java 11 and 17, but recommend Java 17 primarily. Both 17 and 11 are LTS versions of Java. But the standalone deployment, we recommend this deployment for a long time, and in 4.5 we completely dropped support for the Tomcat deployment, so it was not support it anymore, and now it's not even possible because war packaging was changed to jar packaging. We'll look at it on the next slide in a little more details. Let's go to the repository. We recommend using native repository with PostgreSQL versions 13, 14, and last, month, there's a new version 15, which is also supported. The old generic repository is deprecated, but still supported for Postgres, Oracle, and SQL Server. But many new features are not supported with the old repository. For instance, that assignment panel search, I believe you definitely don't get all the ways how you can find it. And also the smart correlation, fuzzy matching is not there, and so on and so on. And talking about browsers, any recent version of any of those popular browsers is possible to use. So what does the change of packaging change for you? That depends on how you use it. If you just download the distribution package and use the shell scripts that are provided, then there is no change for you at all. But if you somewhere point to that lib/midpoint.war, which can happen, for instance, in your service definitions, like systemd service, then you have to rewrite it to midpoint.jar. But that's the only change you have to do. Otherwise, it's functionally the same. If you create your own midpoint overlay, there's also a change. It's not war overlay anymore, but you have to simply use Spring Boot repackage. And everything is documented in the example project on the provided URL. With that, well, now you can't click on these links yet, but they will be available in the downloadable document, and then you can go through them when you want. With that, I thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions.